Episode 92, Prospect Review, Space Talk, and Indie Films. Welcome to the Visionary Variety Podcast, where we cover cool stuff like photo, video, film, books, and technology. So switch on your brain and enjoy the show. Thanks for listening to the podcast. In this episode, we're going to be reviewing the Prospect film, which is on Hulu. We're also going to be talking a little bit about space technology as it regards to the movie, and we're going to finish it up by talking about indie films and how they work, how they come together. So on this episode, I have joining with me my friend Abi León.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back.
Yeah, it's always great to have you on the episode. It's going to be a fun one because we're going to talk all about movies and the science behind them. So it had its wider release last year, and that was at the South by Southwest Film Festival, right, Abi?
Yeah, so what they do is they usually do the film circuit. So they'll do a front film circuit before they do a wider release, just to garner up buzz, get reviews out there, and things like that. So like an official release, film festivals don't count as official releases. They're just they're just film festivals. Yeah.
It looks like it caught on Hulu maybe within a month or two. I'm not sure when that popped on, but I haven't heard anything about it until maybe a month or two ago. So the directors are Christopher Caldwell and Zeke Earle, and they're also the writers of the story. And the star actors are Sophie Thatcher, Jay Duplass, which plays the dad, and Pedro Pascal, which plays kind of the villain-ish.
Yeah.
And he's also the actor in The Mandalorian, so that's cool.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to all the new Star Wars stuff. Everybody asks me, because I'm, a nerd and I love sci-fi and everything like that. But Star Wars has never been, until the new stuff that just came out, like I was never into Star Wars.
Like which new stuff are you referring to?
I'm talking about the new trilogy. 7? The new trilogy.
Okay.
And
then
Rogue One, Solo.
Yeah.
Even Clone Wars, that really didn't attract me. After Disney took over and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to all this new stuff, which is right around the corner. I don't know when this episode's actually going to air, but November 12th is when they launch their Disney Plus package, which is literally next week.
Yeah, this episode should come out either the day before or the day on that.
There you go. Yeah.
Can't wait. I need to drop my normal Hulu subscription and save a little bit of money by getting the Disney Plus, because it's got Hulu with ads and also ESPN.
ESPN Plus. Yeah, but the Disney Plus also comes with National Geographic.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Sweet.
So there's
like that.
It's a whole line. I mean, it's a whole network. It's a whole network. I wouldn't be surprised if they add ABC like on demand onto there, because they own ABC, and a bunch of Fox stuff is coming on there too.
Yeah, cool. Well, we're probably gonna just have an episode for that for Disney Plus.
Yeah,
maybe the week after.
Yeah,
after we've scanned through all the selections and made lists of what we want to watch.
Yeah.
So back to Prospect. Let's do our ratings and kind of our general thoughts, and then we'll get into more detailed spoiler discussions. So what's your rating? What are your first thoughts about the movie?
What's the scale this time? What do we want to do?
Up to 5.
The Tesla Starship. Let's do that. So I say, I want to say 3 or 4 starships, I guess. Because of its, I think, how could I place this? There was something about it that I wanted to keep watching it, but it felt like I've seen it before, but it still felt original. So there was I want to watch it again so I could catch some more of the nuances in the acting, because the first time I was just caught up in trying to piece it all together. And then,
was it predictable to you?
Not generally. I just knew. Like I said, the story felt familiar. I classified it as, when we were talking online, I classified it as a space western. The whole thing felt like a space western, like just supplant the ships with like horse-driven wagons and stuff like that, and then it just feels
like some gold.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, that was the name of it, right? So that's where it's derived. I honestly thought they were going to use the unobtainium catchphrase, like, we're looking for unobtainium.
Oh gosh, eye roll.
Exactly. But yeah, I'd say 3.5. Let's say 3.5 starships. So one of them isn't lifting off the ground all the way. So
maybe it got cut in half later.
Yeah. 3.5.
I would say the same. Mine is about 3.5. Maybe I'm going to say 4 because I did enjoy it. I don't have like a long list of complaints of what I would change if I could. So in that case, I think I'll bump it up to a 4 personally.
Okay, so there was a lot of shots that were just cinematic on purpose, like
Yeah, zoom ins and pans and stuff.
just B-roll stuff, like a wide shot of the valley with a big giant other planet in the sky or
Yeah.
something like they did a lot of those. And they hung on to them for about 10 or 15 seconds a piece. And I'm like, okay, we get it.
Indie movies love that.
I like I said, for an indie film, I thought it was really long. It was an hour and 40 some odd minutes. And for a film, we'll talk about film submissions later, but for a film submission, I also thought it was very long. I'm like, I know that some people submit their films to Cannes and Sundance and stuff like that, and they're full featured films. But South by Southwest, I think they could have probably cut out at least 20 minutes worth of footage.
That happens in Austin, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Have you ever been?
I haven't been in 11 years. It's nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's pretty much, I've walked around, but I haven't been into anything. They're a boutique film festival now. So they're legit. I mean, amazing submissions and stuff like that. And they're happening now. They're up there. And the reason I mention that is just to simply state that the passes are expensive.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, just for a simple screen pass to go and watch it's over $200. I guess that that's not I mean, for me and you it's probably expensive, but because we got we got a whole football team just between you and I.
Yeah. All right, so here is our spoiler warning. We're going to get into the spoilers of the movie. All right, so let's talk about likes and dislikes. What are some things that, you particularly thought were impressive or surprised you in a good way, and maybe some not so much?
The cast acting was really, really well done. You hear independent film, not necessarily that independent films are bad actors, but the caliber of actors were just phenomenal for this film, especially for Dust. I thought that was like, wow.
Yeah, I was impressed too.
Some of those are A-list people now. Maybe they weren't 2 years ago, but now they're A-listers, and just amazing performances by everybody all around. I think I briefly mentioned, I think the pacing was a little bit too slow. That's something I disliked.
Make an Abi cut of the movie.
Yeah,
cut out like 20 minutes.
Yeah, doing the last 10 years or 7 or 8 years, I've been doing just sizzle reels after sizzle reels, just recaps, and always trying to get the most said in this little amount of time, and still trying to get the message across. And so whenever somebody lags on a shot for 3 or 4 extra seconds, I'm like, man, that's you do that over the course of 20 shots, and
it adds up.
That's 5 minutes you cut off of the film.
So funny story about that. So I'm watching it with my wife 2 nights ago, and she doesn't watch a lot of indie films. I don't either. Sadly, right. I want to watch more, but it's a different genre. This is not a Michael Bay film. It's not fast paced and exciting and like eye candy everywhere that just keep you, ADHD attentive kind of movie. Like this is just a slow paced, artistic, different way to tell a story. So
would Martin Scorsese consider it cinema? Is the question.
Gosh. He's a new standard.
Did you see his follow-up interview for that?
No.
He released a follow-up that was actually very well spoken. He explained himself in the context of the interview where he was just they took the hot take off of him.
Of course.
It's like Marvel is a cinema. Yeah. They took that hot take and turned it into just what it was. And he's like, no, that's not what I meant. And then he goes on and expounds a little bit on.
I need to watch that.
Actually, a lot of it. Yeah. It's an article. He talks about what he meant by Marvel isn't cinema. And it's basically semantics is really what it is.
Yeah.
The one thing that I characterize indie film is that flat grading. That flat grading that I see across church filmmakers and indie filmmakers, where they're trying to emulate this like dull look or this dull filter. Yeah. And I'm like, that's just somebody made that popular because they didn't know how to color grade, and
And then it became a thing.
and then it became yeah, exactly. It became a thing. And I'm like,
Gotta love
that's
trends.
hard. Yeah. And so it's a lazy trend.
Yeah.
And now people
hate
have
trends.
filters just for that look. And so I associate indie films with that lazy trend. Indie filmmaker that doesn't have
Funny.
access to all the experience or the tools or the skill set to make a movie pop. This being an indie film, I actually half expected it to be with that dull film, and it wasn't. So again, I liked it. Looked great. I mean,
Yeah.
the colors, the color tone was consistent across the whole film. I mean, it was a high production value indie film.
I was very impressed too. So, I was saying earlier, my wife and I were watching it, and she's not used to these types of movies. And so she was just like bored. She was just on her phone. She looked up. She goes, "Why? What just happened? Or why did he do that?" I was like, "Honey, like you didn't see. Like this is a very simple story. They come to the planet to find the thing, and then there's guys already here that want to also get the thing." And she wasn't following because she was distracted and she was bored. So I was like, you know what? You can watch your little shows, and I'll just watch this later on my own because she wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
But it is interesting when you watch these types of indie films, how differently paced they can be than what we're used to, in the theater. Not a bad thing, it's just different. It's a different thing.
I think it's because they have significantly more latitude to express themselves creatively, the producers or the directors. So they're not. I would see like a major film studio's like, hey man, I need you to cut 20 minutes off of this thing, easily.
Yeah.
Lingering shots that just stood too long, and in real life, conversation is a lot more quick.
Yeah,
it's a lot quicker, and there was things that L cuts and that could have just been a lot quicker in my book. As far as observing editing techniques and things like that. So, but because it was an indie film, I think that's why it drug out a little bit.
Well, something interesting happens in my mind, and I don't know if this is purposeful or if other people experience this. When there's movies like this where there's long pauses in between, like in the middle of dialogue pieces, there's pauses, there's gaps, and it's like you feel like the character is thinking what they're going to say next, or they're weighing their options, especially in a movie like this where it's very like survivalism. Like if I make one wrong step, that could be the end of me, kind of big deal if you do the wrong decision. So they're thinking, they're weighing their options in their head. To me, this is what happens with me when I watch movies like this, is I feel like I am reading in between the lines or in between the dialogues of what they're thinking. I'm like building this headcanon of what they're thinking and saying to themselves. And then, the next actual line of dialogue comes along and maybe it does or doesn't jive with what I was thinking they were thinking. Does that make sense? I don't know. Is that normal?
I don't know if it's normal, but in my head, I'm looking for reality and dialogue.
Yeah.
Help me with my suspension of disbelief so that this feels more real. And sometimes those breaks for me are just too much.
Take you out of it?
They take me out of it because I'm like, okay, keep talking, guys. Like the negotiation should have been a lot quicker.
Yeah, like I wouldn't just stand there and stare at this person,
Yeah, like me and you right now, we're kind of talking over each other a little bit. And we're jumping in as we have a thought, and that's how real dialogue happens. And so, in my head, I'm like, that wouldn't happen. You wouldn't talk that slow in real life,
It's so awkward.
Are you trying to get to 90 minutes? It's like,
Ironically, quote unquote, reality TV does that all the time. I hate that editing technique they do when they'll have 3 cameras recording one 5-second moment, and they'll stretch it out to 30 or 40 seconds of people staring at each other and looking back and forth. And licking their lips and fiddling their thumbs. That didn't happen in real life. Not like that. And they make it this intense back and forth, like psychic dialogue. And it's, hate it. Andy does that in a kind of a different way. But
yeah, exactly.
I feel your frustration. So likes and dislikes for me, I liked the world building. There was like almost Star Wars-y sci-fi world building going on in this indie film. That was filmed in 40 days and everything was built in 7 months, like very fast. But they did a great job. I can tell there were some serious nerds putting in some good work to make this like a deep sci-fi world. And it's even simple things like stickers on the inside of the space station, having like this pseudo culture that's very sparsely referenced, but there is a bigger space culture going on that there's things calling out to. And
Yeah.
you really pick up on that more if you do the behind the scenes homework, which I did. But then it kind of just makes things even like lusher, and I love it. There's the false language that she's writing in. You see this really pixely language on all the products. There's actually 2 languages printed on all the labels and stuff. Everything has labels. That's cool. It's very realistic. And
yeah, that I think
like
those
that.
details are what sells the environment.
Yeah.
It's very important, and another differentiator between like an indie probably that I would do, or or a big budget indie.
Yeah, so I like that. I kind of liked how at least their ship, maybe not other people's ships, maybe not the main like space station, but their little capsule was very low tech. It was like they were poor, They had like the poor man's lander.
You know what I was thinking when I saw that? Because when she, remember when she ran back to the pod or whatever to try to get it. In my head, as I was watching, I'm like, man, those panels are really separated, and I started to think, why would they do that? And then I started to process in my head, well, if I was an engineer, I'd want to create like safeguards and redundancies so the package would actually be really big for what would normally be a simple panel here on Earth. Up there, it would probably be 4 times the size because they have redundancies built into that panel, and so that's why the panels were so. Not the panel itself or the touch screen or the knobs or whatever, but the boxes, that those panels were set in were fairly large. And I'm like, oh, okay, I could. And in my head, I was justifying why they looked the way they did, why they were. It was really cool.
Like, dummy proof. Well, also,
Yeah.
if you're wearing space gloves, you can't have teeny tiny little stuff everywhere either.
Yeah, exactly. You can't. Yeah.
But there weren't any like LED displays. There was no hologram projection. There was no like screen. I mean, there was like very basic cathode screens that had like flickering like lines
Analog.
and oscilloscopes. Yeah, analog. It's super analog. And the landing periscope. I'm like, what is that? That's horrible. I don't want that if I'm landing on a planet. But hey, you get what you can afford, right? In the space race.
Yeah.
So. I appreciated those little subtle touches, and when you watch the behind the scenes stuff about how they designed it, it just makes it even cooler because they just put a lot of thought into like the fuse box and the controls and just the room itself. Really cool. We'll get into that later when we talk about behind the scenes. This is something that bothered my wife was the lack of a soundtrack. She's like, "There's no music."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, it's an indie film. Like, not that they can't afford it, but that's just a different storytelling device. And sometimes we don't have music in the background. It's quiet. It makes you think. It makes you take in the setting or wonder what's going to happen.
Maybe
next.
that's what drew it out for me too. Because being being originally an audio guy, I kind of did miss that. Yeah. Now that you mentioned it, I subconsciously noticed that was not there. Yeah.
There was an interesting scene that really struck me was when the what was the bad guy's name? Him, the bad dude, when he came into her space capsule and she shot him, and then they had this really interesting dialogue about the dad. She's like, "You killed my dad." He's like, "Well, actually, yes, but he stole my whole like loot, and that's what we do out here. Is you shoot someone if they steal, your finds." And he had it coming. I was like, "Oh, that's difficult for the daughter," because was it the dad's fault that he got killed? Kind of. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it all points back to, for me, the whole space western thing.
Yeah, totally.
Is a wild, wild west, and so in the wild, wild west, that's exactly what it was. It's like people died when you saddled their horse or you took their hat, or whatever. So so I think that was apropos in this case, because from the very beginning, about 20 minutes in, I was thinking, okay, this is a space western, and so in my head, I flipped that switch and I kind of approached the action and the consequences and the causation on that. Like it's the wild, wild space frontier.
Yeah.
And
speaking of which, did that guy not sound like Mal from Firefly? My goodness.
I actually don't know.
What? You haven't seen Firefly?
Yes, I have seen Firefly, but it's not religiously ingrained in my head. So
okay, I've seen it twice.
I saw that in the
he talks a lot like Mal. He's got fancy words just to kind of fill up space.
To me, you know who he sounded like? He sounded like guy from Walking Dead. What's his name?
See that I wouldn't know.
Oh, that's who.
Is he a Southern guy that's kind of fancy? Or?
Yeah. It just he's supposed to be a scientist at the beginning, and he ends up not being a scientist, and he's just.
I have heard about that.
Eugene Porter is the character's name. Is played by Josh McDermott, but the same thing. He's very bombastic and very purposeful, and the cadence of his. You know what? I'm remembering Mel now in Firefly. Yeah, not bombastic, but using bigger words and taking his time and making sure that you understand, and his purpose for speaking is very clear, you know?
Now, I like how the character of Mal does it. He does it in a good guy way. This guy is kind of sleazy, trying to just peacemake with everyone. Yeah, so he can get the upper hand eventually, long con kind of deal. But so when he does this extra talk, I don't like it. It's a good bad guy technique, I feel. But it's like, he comes off as a nice guy, but, he's really not. So, I don't know. That stood out to me as interesting. Very similar to Mal's character, although a little bit flip-flop with the good guy, bad guy thing. So that amputation scene, did that bother you? Do you?
At first, it was slow for me, and I was listening, and I wasn't listening, and I checked my phone or whatever, and I'm listening, and I hear something about the shot in his arm. It's whatever's getting infected or whatever, and he says you got to do it. And at first, I thought she was like just cutting away maybe some rotten flesh.
That's
or
what
from
I thought.
like just cutting away the. And then I heard crunching, and I'm like, wait a second, what is she doing? And so then and then it pulled away, and I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, so it was a shock. It was a shock because I didn't I thought she was just like cauterizing the wound and cleaning it, because she did cauterize it. Yeah, and or whatever damage was done to that, like cut out the flesh, cut out that 4 or 5 square inches of flesh. But then I started hearing crunching, and I was like, ooh, wait a second. Oh my God, she's cutting off his arm. And then she stapled it like an empanada, it looked like an empanada, just like stapled together.
And she was totally calm, and she explains that when she was 12, she had to crawl up into what I assume is an alien life form body and like harvest the organs. I'm thinking that's nasty. That's
traumatic. I thought it was. Yeah, so see, that too pointed, like, I imagine in the Wild West when, if a kid, if their dad got their ankle broken, that the kid would then have to fix it or something, or the wife. And I can imagine that they had stronger intestinal fortitude at the time to be able to handle. Yeah, the people tending to them too, like had to be a lot more, a lot less queasy. What's the word? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I would so die in that world. Like, I would not last. I can't even handle needles, blood, holes in bodies that shouldn't be there really bother me.
Yeah, I've had incidents when I was in Mexico, even younger, where gruesome accidents happen, and when the adrenaline would kick in, we didn't have the luxury that we do here in the States, where you could just go to an ER or
clinic.
Yeah, a little clinic, and just do what you got to do. Take your belt off, grab a twine, and just
gotta survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did like the survivalism of this movie, and for some reason, maybe it's because I'm a city kid and I'm a mostly interior nerd. I do love nature, and I like to go outside when I can, but I also like to be inside. So survival movies intrigue me. Like, I Am Legend, for some reason, has just really like struck a chord with me when I watched that movie, because not only is it survival, but he's the only guy in almost what it seems to be in the whole world. And for some reason, I'm just like, that's so intriguing to me. I'm like, what if that was me? What would I do first? How could I survive long term and make food? Like, could I learn stuff in time to, save myself? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I like survival stories like this, where it's you against the world or you against an injury, and you've got to pull through somehow. It makes for a dramatic story.
In the last 20 years, I've gone camping maybe 2 times.
Same.
But before that, I I mean, we were going camping 3 times a year
Mm.
when I was back home, 2 or 3 times a year, religiously my whole life from like 1983 to like 1997.
Yeah.
And so my dad didn't teach me how to fish necessarily, but I mean, he's one of those guys that would catch catfish with his bare hand,
That's
that where
brave.
they, yeah,
Because they can cut you, right?
yeah, they can.
Mm.
And so as much as I'd probably hate to admit it, that was that laid a huge impression on me. So I think if push comes to shove, I have the skill set. I just
Yeah.
haven't used it in 20 years. It'd probably take a good month before it all came back, in full survival mode. But, who knows? That first month might be very, very
rough.
important. Yeah.
I think my ingenuity, my creativity, and my like strong love of learning new things, I think that would come full circle eventually. But yeah,
Mhm.
initially I'd have a lot of learning to do. Like I know nothing about agriculture. Yeah, it'd be a lot to catch
Yeah,
up on.
my dad's family are farmers and stuff like that.
They
And
know stuff.
I don't have like a bug out bag or anything like
Right.
that, or a bug out location, but I would like to think that we could do it. And I mean, everybody does, right? But
Start
yeah,
prepping.
I don't know, that first month, little Jimmy or little Johnny has dysentery. Oops, sorry. Oregon Trail.
Oregon Trail.
We're done.
Dude, what if they made a movie about that, a live action? Would that be so funny and weird?
Oh, actually, it's a great idea, but I'm sure
It
there's
could be
some.
comedy or not.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, it'd be very short. I think it'd be very short. It's just like a montage of just kids dying. Like you have 8 or 9 kids and only 2 make it, and your wife makes it, but you don't have a leg and she doesn't have an arm. And
Or it could be a Groundhog's Day situation where you just restart, like Bandersnatch.
oh, yeah,
that'd be trippy.
oh, that's a great idea. That's
You're welcome.
like a yeah.
You can
Where's
credit
it
me.
at? No. Yeah, I'll credit you.
So
I'm looking at my notes for movie ideas.
So let's finish up this discussion about this movie with a little bit of interesting behind the scenes stuff that I found out.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
everything was made, all the props, all the sets, all the costumes were made in one pretty big room. I mean, it wasn't ginormous, but it was, a medium to small sized warehouse space that they rented. And I think it was like a boat shop of some kind. So somehow they rented it. And they all the different workers were in there, the graphic designers, the costume makers, the prop, the set design. They were all in one like open space, and they made everything in 7 months. And then they cleaned out the shop and they used it as a soundstage to actually record all the interior shots in the spaceship. So that's pretty creative of them. A good way to save some money, and also not have to move stuff around, right?
Yeah, that's anytime in a movie, I always think of that movie with Colin Farrell, Phone Booth. It literally took place like at 3 locations, and 2/3 of it was at that phone booth. And
funny.
it's just another creative way that independent film people,
One of the tricks of the trade.
Yeah, it's low budget. I think the idea is low budget, high concept. So it's a very high concept movie. It's very low budget in the general sense, in the relative sense.
Yeah.
And that's how you do it. You just like, hey, look, we're gonna rent out your location and you would basically ask them simply like, hey, how much revenue do you guys make a month? Like, well, we make $15,000 a month. And like, okay, well, we'll pay for 2 months worth of your revenue. That's $30,000, and now you've got a location for $30,000.
Yeah.
And so when you're spending $1 million, that's dirt.
Multi-purpose
That's
location
dirt.
too.
Yeah, that's dirt cheap. You know what I'm saying? So you negotiate in that way, and then you bump up a little bit more to make it more lucrative for them and whatnot. And then you have the location. They keep the props or whatever. They keep some props to make it a location for tourists and stuff like that. And you've got yourself a very inexpensive.
I need you on my team for the future. So talking about the set design, they made the space capsule in removable sections. I think it was probably in quarters, so they could remove a panel or a whole section and put a cameraman there. that's how they shot the interiors. I mean, you can use a wide angle lens, but it would basically have the cameraman where the wall would have been, so they could remove sections of the interior wall that weren't visible.
Yeah.
That's pretty common for small sets.
It's common for everything. TV does it all the time.
Yeah.
TV does.
Cool.
Yeah. So
Modular.
like, yeah, modular sets. Yeah. Breaking Bad. There's the actual house where they filmed at, but then what they did is that on location, they'll recreate parts of it so that they can remove walls to do like a really cool long pan or something like that. And
the house in Aquaman. There's some crazy shots in that house with the fight scenes and stuff. I'm like, how did they just do a crane movement inside of a living room? But it was all reconstructed and probably some CGI extension too. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Did you see that war movie Fury?
Fury. Yes. I did.
So I came across a really interesting clip where they explained how they did the interior shots of the tank. So they built an interior of a tank model, but I think they expanded it a little bit. They added like 1.2 scale, basically, just a little bit larger than the real one was. And there was sections they could remove and put the camera in there. So like you see just like darkness around the edges of the frame, but you get the idea that you're actually seeing the interior of the small tank interior. Really cool visual. I think that's so creative. I love when people do stuff like that. Kind of gives you a new view of something you don't really actually see in real life.
Yeah, it makes it feel like you're present in there with them. You feel the claustrophobia of the scene. It's
you're like a fly on the wall.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Exactly. I think that's the term.
So that amazing forest location, the second I saw it, I was like, where is this place? Those trees look alien. This is like super lush. Looks like an untouched, region, no humans around anywhere. So it turns out that is called the Hoh, H-O-H, the Hoh Rainforest, and it is in the Olympic National Park of Washington. So yeah, it's a real place. And the writers said that they grew up hiking through that place all the time. So they had it in their head from like years and years. We're going to film a sci-fi here, some alien world.
They probably played there, like cowboys and Indians, or like we're space cowboys and we're space Indians or something, and they probably one day I could just see that going down.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that location meant something to them because it had a lot of sentimental connections.
Yeah,
and those are the best locations. If you really want to get into the backstory of the world, or rather just the detail of the world that is made by this movie, go to the Geek Dad website, and they have like 6 different articles that show different props that were made. It shows how they were made, what they were made from. There's text there that explain from the prop makers like what they were thinking and why they did certain things. And there's even like label art that you don't see in the movie, but they made these official labels for like the rifle casing. Then there's a label for that like motorized cutting blade. And it's funny, it's like a product explanation. Like, it kind of sells you on the product. And of course it's got the fake language next to it as well as English. And it's just funny, like some graphic designer was tasked, hey, I need you to make some ads for these fake technologies. And I appreciate that level of world building. That's cool to me.
Yeah, very much so.
Very Star Warsy.
Every little detail in that movie contributed to the environment feeling real. One thing that I noticed was all the floating pollen that was in that. I mean, everything is like, this is technically an untouched moon or untouched world. And so it's almost primordial in the sense that, these trees and these spores are all propagating, or these creatures are continuously propagating. They're untouched by mankind or humankind and so they're continuing on like there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing new on there. And I just thought that visual of the spores just floating around in their space. Cool. Yeah, it felt real.
So about those spores, I'm glad you brought that up. Those are actually shot practical. And what they're from is actually just dust particles. I think they were probably recorded with like an anamorphic lens or something to get some shapy distortions and really good bokeh. Probably like with a side light and a black background or something like that, and just poofing some dust up in the air. So that was shot in the basement of one of the writers' homes. He was down there for like days just recording stock footage and probably some movement and pans with dust and different scales. And then they used that as overlays and probably did a lot of tracking and warping and stuff like that to make it match. But that's cool.
Yeah.
I love me some practical effects, and I did not expect that.
Yeah.
They're very
Just
strange looking.
set everything to screen mode, and
Yep.
then you're good. And
I
then
love me some screen.
yeah.
A lot of people ask me, how do you do all these amazing special effects, like your lightsabers and your energy and particles?
Yeah.
I'm like, screen mode. You
Yeah.
could overlay with nothing but black behind it and put it on screen mode on top, and there you go. Now
Yeah.
you're just as cool as Daniel Grove.
There
It's one
you
of
go.
my best kept secrets, but I don't actually keep it. So
Yeah.
that's it for our discussion about the movie. Now, this movie being sci-fi and so much of it taking place with spacesuits on, and just kind of dealing with some of the mechanics and the difficulties of being on an alien planet in a spacesuit, kind of got me thinking about real spacesuits.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked up some interesting information, just kind of for my own entertainment, but I thought I'd include it in this episode for any nerds out there that are interested in space and space, the real world of space travel. So there is a new generation of spacesuits being developed right now, or they're already developed, called the Artemis generation, or the Artemis spacesuits. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know this, but apparently someone, I don't know if it's NASA, I think it's NASA, they plan on being on the moon in like 2024 and then having
Yep.
like a permanent settlement there of some kind to help us get to Mars by like before 2030.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. I guess I'm out of date on my moon news. That's pretty cool.
That was instituted by Donald Trump, believe it or not. So the whole idea of Space Force, and
Makes sense.
some people made it's laughable, but it's basically what they're doing is, and it's actually very practical because some people don't realize this, but the Air Force used to be part of the Army,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the Army Air Corps, and then I don't know if after World War I they separated and then became the Air Force, and up until now, NASA and all the missions were part of. The pilots, some of them were Navy, but the majority of them were part of the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now they're splitting again.
now they're splitting. They're splitting it again and making it its own division. And they're actually hiring right now. So they've established, as of last year, they've established their full command structure.
Wow.
And I know because I was looking up the jobs. I'm like, oh, what kind of do they need any multimedia guys to help them with their the green screen and all that, and faking all the moon landings?
Fake moon landing 2.0.
Yeah. But do they need any type of media personnel? And they haven't done anything like that, but I'm pretty sure they'll just divide that, or they'll probably take from their existing, Army and Air Force personnel.
I've got a friend who controls or monitors some kind of satellite for the Air Force, and she is now moving into the Space Force. Like, she was a space related Air Force technician, and now she's being grandfathered, or I guess moved into Space Force.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to high school with her. Pretty cool.
Oh, nice.
One of my very first photo shoots, like my first planned photo shoot, was of her. So Artemis, if you want to check that out, look up Artemis Spacesuits. There's a really long, like an hour-long video. It's a little, kind of fluffy, just kind of adding stuff in there. But they do talk about all the new, technology used in the suit, the new levels of flexibility. It's really impressive. I mean, they can wave their arms in complete circles, which sounds so silly, but you couldn't do that with the Apollo spacesuits. They're very limited, and they couldn't really truly walk on the moon. They just kind of had to bunny hop around, but because of limited flexibility, and there wasn't like a waist bearing, you couldn't bend or twist at the waist. Very stiff, and honestly, that would freak me out being in a suit like that, trying to walk on an alien world. Not cool. But the Artemis suits are very flexible. You can twist and bend your waist and your hips, and there's like 3 or 4 joints in the legs. It's very flexible, so that's pretty cool. That'll really help in spacewalks too, fixing and getting around in space much easier now. Something I've always been curious about was how the heck do you go to the bathroom if you're in a 6-hour spacewalk and you just got to go? And the answer was not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. You just go.
You just go. You wear a really big diaper.
I thought they don't do cath. They don't it's not a catheter?
No,
it's just a big diaper.
It's called like a MAG, like maximum absorbent garment MAG. And it's a space diaper. And you just go and got to deal with it for the rest. I hope you don't got to go number 2. I don't want to talk about that.
Well, I'm pretty sure that they have the driest fabric technology that that Pampers or or great value has.
What if you drop a nasty one and just your whole interior of your suit just stinks? Like that would suck.
I don't think that they would.
Think you're
I
sealed
mean,
off?
a spacewalk is what, I don't know what the longest spacewalk is. I guess I could look it up. Longest.
They can last 6 to 8 hours.
You've gone without going number 2 for that long, so I mean, I would presume that that those mags or maximum absorbing garments are, odor resistant and stuff like that. I would
need some of those for my
but
kids.
that's the longest. That's the longest one. The longest one was almost 9 hours.
Wow.
But they, on average, they're an hour, 2 hours, and I'm sure that they probably don't.
Yeah,
but in the case that they have an emergency,
oh man,
yeah,
who knew
they'll
we
be
talk
fine.
about this in the podcast.
Yeah, space undies.
My mind went immediately to to the gutter with this subject because I had just finished listening to Neil Stephenson's Anthem, which I talked about in the previous episode 91. It was kind of an audiobook recap of the books I just finished. And in that book, there's a really interesting system. If they need to go, they have a command in their spacesuit, and basically something like seals off at their waist, and they just do whatever they need to do, and then like liquid oxygen or whatever like flushes it out the back. And I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, oh, that's nasty, but hey, that's pretty sweet. No diaper. So then I was like, how does it really work for the NASA? So there you go, space undies. So a few more things about the spacesuits and how they work is food and drink. So there is actually a pouch that, at least in the Apollo missions, this is probably going to be slightly updated with the Artemis suits, but in the old school suits, there would be a thing that would Velcro or snap onto your chest, and it was either a 21 or 32 ounce container of whatever drink, and there's a little nozzle that has a valve in it, and you just kind of lean your head down and suck on it, and there you go. And they did actually originally have bars, like food bars wrapped in edible rice paper that would also be kind of held at like your neck clavicle area. You just kind of bend your head down at a weird angle and take a bite. And yeah, it's kind of funny. Apparently they've kind of stopped doing that one because people just prefer just to drink or, eat ahead of time and not have a bar to eat in your suit.
Yeah, that would be a little annoying.
Kind of silly.
Unless you're going to be out there for 8 hours,
Yeah, there you go.
In which case, yeah. Yeah, in rice paper, right?
And last thing, this has always interested me. I've heard about this a long, long time ago. When astronauts are on spacewalks, they occasionally will see flashes of light in their vision, and it's only that person will see it. Other people don't see it. And what it turns out these are actually cosmic rays coming from deep space, zooming through space at possibly faster than light. I'm not sure about that part, but if not, the speed of light. And when they interact with the cones and rods of our eye vision inside of our eyes, they actually will produce flashes of light in our, in our brain. So they didn't know what this was for a long time, and did a bunch of weird experiments to figure out where is this coming from? Is it rays? Is it radiation? Is it just psychosomatic? Like these people are in space for a long time. Are they losing their mind? And one of the experiments they made was this big, it looks like a welding mask, and the astronaut would wear it, and there was a connected button. They would push a button whenever they saw the flash of light. So that would record the exact time that they saw the flash, and then they could then take that helmet off and examine it in an electron microscope or something very similar, and they could find the tracks where the light hit or where the rays and particles went through the mask. It's really cool. You can actually see electron microscope photos of the glass of these astronauts' faceplates, and they have these weird spiky dents in them, and that's from the particles colliding with the glass and shooting through the through the molecular structures. Really cool.
Wow.
Our planet is always getting bombarded by all kinds of stuff from, the whole range of electromagnetic frequencies. The very top one is cosmic rays. I think that's the most energetic or highest energy, source in the universe is these things. And they're everywhere. They get blocked by our atmosphere, thankfully. But when you're above the atmosphere, now you've got these rays shooting through you. On the off chance that they do collide with your rods or your cones in your eye, then you're able to see them. So pretty cool. But you didn't know that. There you go. Okay, so that's enough to talk about sci-fi NASA stuff. Let's talk about movies. So just to kind of go back a little bit, we were talking about South by Southwest. Do you pay for an exorbitant price for a ticket? Well, from our income, it's a little bit much.
Yeah.
But do you just get a schedule of all the movies that are playing, like when and where, and you just pick where you want to go? Like, how does it actually work?
Yeah. That's it. That's exactly it. It's just like a convention
How long does it
that
last?
has breakout rooms. It's a week long.
Oh,
I think the technology talks, the technology talks start first.
mhm.
The music portion of it is happening like a week before. They're having a huge,
uh,
I mean, it's like the music portion is like 10 days long.
yeah, worst traffic in the world.
Every bar has their own, tries to do their own little like rooftop
Yeah,
concerts and stuff like that. And
you have to park 20 miles away.
yeah, uh, and then and then the technology, and then the film, and then some people, they're throwing politics in there now. So
Oh gosh.
politics lasts a couple days, and so yeah, it's technically it's about a week long, about
Mm.
5-6 days, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I noticed about this movie, of course, before the movie actually started, was there is a whole bunch of like logos. I don't know if they're studios, if they're
Hmm.
investors. Like before the movie started, I joked about it with my wife. I said, if there is one more logo, I'm gonna just watch something else. And there was another logo, but
There's like 4 or 5,
no,
I
that was
think.
like six. It's just seven.
Yeah.
It was a lot. Oh, who are they,
Yeah.
and what do you? I mean, what's up with that? You don't see that in other movies.
Well, no, it's just it could be several things. It could be executive producer that Bad Robot. Whenever J.J. Abrams produces something, he has his Bad Robot thing.
Yep. Bad robot.
Uh, uh, Steven Spielberg has Amblin Entertainment,
Mm.
and basically they're the corporate umbrella that's covering the producers. And so they could be anywhere from like huge sponsors, executive producers, umbrella companies, or something like that. So like if I executive produced a film, I would have my Lion Tree Media splash screen going before the
Yeah.
film. I wouldn't put just my name up there. I would I
Phone
would have
number.
something. Yeah, I would have something that looked cool, that
Yeah.
stood
Motion
for me.
graphics.
And
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. So umbrella companies, distribution companies. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Cool. So another thing that I had a question about was Dust. So I see them on Facebook. I follow them, and they post basically like indie sci-fi shorts, which are really good.
Hmm.
Almost this
Hmm.
quality, not quite, but in some sense, they're very high quality. What is
Yeah.
Dust, and what's their role in this movie, if you know?
Well, in this case, this is an original film from Dust, and Dust
Okay.
is basically the equivalent of like a music label
Mm.
that handles all the logistics, that handles
Ah.
all the production, that handles all they're basically the corporation that
Hmm.
handles all the distribution of duties, production, and everything like that. So they're the major label. They're the major label um major studio label that handled the making of the film.
Cool.
From there, they would hire producers.
Hmm.
Once they let's say the owners of the label, they say, okay, we like this film. Okay, so then they would hire a producer who would then be in charge of securing investors, which would later become executive producers. They would be the label would hire a producer to find the director,
Mm.
to find, and then depending on the scope that of freedom that they give the director would then pick his own cinematographer, pick his own gaffers, pick his own, and then it starts trickling down as far as who gets to hire who.
I've got a dream of being hired by one of these sci-fi indie films to be the photographer. Like take the character photos, take, of course, behind the
Hmm.
scenes stuff, but I want to do like official, like the portraits of each character on set, offset, things like that. That would be just so
Yeah,
cool to me.
behind the scenes, all that stuff. Yeah, that's a.
You can find like official character portraits for the Star Wars films. And I think
Hmm.
most of them were done by, I think it's Annie Leibovitz, an awesome, awesome, very creative photographer. And of course gets hired by the big names, but like that's a dream job of mine.
Yeah,
Put it out there.
definitely. I would think that somebody like in Austin, actually even here, I can't remember what his name was, but I know Cheech Marin just did a huge film here in San Antonio that
Huh.
went national, and one of the characters, he was in Blood In Blood Out. I can't ever remember names. My mind's been foggy lately, but
Mm.
um, my point being, that it would just be a matter of just getting on set with one of those and say, hey man, let me take some photos for you. And if you like them, you could pay me for them, or, give me a producer credit. But you would only want that type of, that's the kind of exposure you actually do want, because you're getting on a major film. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't hire you for exposure, because I'm nobody, but you get into those places, maybe even Robert Rodriguez up in Austin, and you say, hey man, let's,
I'll lead it too.
That is the kind of exposure you actually would work for.
Yeah.
Because it's real exposure. It's major industry exposure.
So the funny story, I recently got an offer, to have some of my photos used in a Netflix original series. And
Ooh.
yeah, that was my first reaction until I read the contract, which basically says that they have complete ownership, copyright, and they can do whatever they want with the photos without my say, which that's normal. I mean, they would be taking it for business use, but they wouldn't give me any credit in the listing. And they also weren't willing to pay me. I'm like, this is Netflix. What?
Well, was it Netflix, or was it a film that was producing something for Netflix?
Sure, it could have been that, but I was led to believe that it was directly from Netflix. And when I gave them a price, they said, "I'm sorry, we're not able to compensate for this." I'm like, "All right, well then you can't have my photos. Sorry, I'm not gonna have no listing." And honestly, it wouldn't benefit me at all to do this for free. No benefit. Maybe bragging rights, but that's not gonna get me a job.
No, it wouldn't. No, that was a solid decision. Was it a documentary or something like that?
No, that's a weird thing. This is what adds to me being fine with saying no. I think it was some kind of sitcom or drama show. The photos they were going to use was like one of my very first weddings I ever did of the bride. And I mean, was it like a background photo on a set frame? I don't know. It wasn't like because my photo was awesome. It was just because the bride actually knew someone working on this film and said, "Hey, you can use my photos, but you need to ask my photographer for permission." So they did, and that's how it happened. So it wasn't like one of my awesome cosplay photos or something I did about something. It wasn't even related to the quality of my photo. I was just like, yeah, I'll be fine.
Maybe somebody with less experience would probably
totally
be a better fit. Yeah.
So a bunch of people tried to convince me to go back on this. Said, "Oh, that's great exposure." I'm like, but there isn't any exposure. There's no credit. There's no benefit.
I mean, even the credit alone would have been exposure enough. Just like just put my name that you used my photo. That's it. It's just like background photographer or something. Just
sure. But at the same time, who watches a credit listing on a Netflix episode? I don't know.
I do.
You do. You do.
I do. Yeah.
You are not normal.
I actually, it was me and another guy. I just went to a movie and recently, and I sat through the whole credits just to pay respect to the people that made the movie. I didn't necessarily read them all, but I'm going to sit there and observe through my eye gate that these people made this film and these people took the time. So but I would. There was me and another guy that just sat through the credits all the way to the
true cinemaphiles.
Yeah.
Okay, so a few more questions. Where does the money come from for these kinds of movies?
So like I said, once a movie is greenlit and the studio hires a producer to create this movie and they have the script and whatnot, that producer will then start to hire people that the studio agrees to. And the producer's also in charge of garnering investors for the film. So usually a studio has a go-to pool of rich people or rich capital ventures, companies that do this specifically. So you have venture capitalists that only, submit or only lend cash to movies. There's some venture capitalists that only do sci-fi, that only do westerns, or that only do indies or whatever. And I learned a long time ago, whereas music, it's really hard to make it big in music. Music is kind of like the scratch offs of the creative arts industry, where you could win something, but most likely you're not. It's just more because you love the art. Whereas movies is like stocks and bonds. There is risk involved, but if you get in on a good stock and a good movie and a good script, then the payoff could be very high. I always thought, like, if I won the the Powerball, for $1 billion. I would take $250,000 of that and say, hey, look, I'm a venture capitalist for
Nice.
Marvel. I will spot all this cash for this movie because I know I'm going to get, and that's that. And so you'd have to get in on the pool of that. But so these investors are just pretty much just sitting, waiting for the type of movie that they want to invest in. And so the producer then goes to the investor board or the venture capitalist that he knows or the pool that the studio uses and says, okay, guys, we were greenlit for this project. This is what it's about. Here's the first 5 pages. Here's the synopsis. Here's the log line. Here's the skeleton, whatever, to get these investors interested in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they in turn would be like, okay, we're willing to put up, $2.5 million of the budget. And then in exchange for,
some of the ticket sales,
8% return,
yeah,
or and an executive producer credit, and stuff like that. So then they'll become associated that way. And then the producer then is beholden to them as far as timeline, budget, and everything like that. I think we mentioned a little bit before the show started. We were having a conversation. They're also the ones that the producer would go to and say, hey, we're 5 days over. We're going to need an extra $200,000. Which one of you can do it? If none of you can do it, then we'll hire an associate producer, somebody that can invest $200K really quick on the spot, to help us extend the film and things like that.
So much business. Ugh,
it numbers. It's that's the kind of stuff that you learn in film school. I mean, I guess you could learn that without going to film school, but
better safe than sorry. Learn it the right way in school. So in film school, you actually learn the business side behind it. I've learned that in photography school, you do not learn the business side behind photography. It's kind of sad.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would say probably because it's a lot less, frankly, and with all due respect to your profession, it's a lot less convoluted. There's a lot less moving parts. Mm-hmm. And I mean, movies, again, you're dealing with stocks and bonds. Yeah. You're dealing, I mean, even tens of thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars. And whereas every dollar counts,
Mm-hmm.
So they get it from investors. They get it from people that are already set aside in a pool waiting to invest in films because they understand the value that they can get. I mean, there's bombs that, Battlefield Earth and stuff like that can lose people money. But again, that's the risk. It's like investing in a stock. And then 1 year later, they bomb out, well, you lose that money, you sell off their assets and you recoup as much as you can, which in the case of a movie, let's say they get halfway through shooting and they cut it, then they sell off the assets to auction houses, prop houses,
collectors,
rent out gear that maybe they have bought and stuff like that, and try to recoup as much money, because then the ownership goes to whoever contributed the most. So first choice of assets goes to the executive producer that put up $2 million, and then the executive producer that put up $1 million or whatever. It's really complex.
Yeah. And I'm glad photography is nice and simple. It's not cheap, but at least it's simpler.
So that's where they make money, and they get their money back through, for example, we were talking about Prospect.
Mm-hmm.
Prospect was debuted at South by Southwest in 2018, and they won the best overall picture for the film festival. I don't know if there was a monetary prize. There probably was. So there's that, but I'm sure it's not. It's not nearly. It's probably some $50,000 prize, or if that. I don't even think it's that, but some small amount compared to the budget that just goes back into a pool. But then what they'll do is they'll distribute it to other festivals where they'll screen it and it'll be like they're renting a movie. They'll distribute it to theaters, make their money back that way, and then again the money goes back to the investors, and the producers get their cut, their payday or whatever. And if they do good on the return, then they get called to produce again, and they get called to to PA again, and
then they work their way up the ladder, hopefully.
yeah, and then other executive producers are willing to work on, like, I know Joel Silver's going to make a hit every single time. So he's a mainstream producer, and executive producers, executive venture capitalists would be like, they're chomping at the bits to work on Joel Silver's next project, because they know that whatever he
good reputation
gets, he's going to get a 300% return on their investment. So, and that's how the money basically moves around.
Wow. Well, thank you for explaining that. Now, I know we talked about the same topic, maybe in a different way, but on episode 79, where we talked about the storytelling of Hollywood, is it dying, or the remakes, or do we have remake exhaustion or fatigue? That was a really great episode, by the way. It's actually a pretty popular one. Good topic. And I really enjoyed finally getting a lot of that stuff, off my chest and out of my mind, getting to finally discuss it, and also getting a lot of answers about things, like how stuff works with scripts and propose and things like that from you. That was a great one. But yeah, if you want to learn more about the filmmaking process and all the back end stuff, definitely check out episode 79. Well, that sums it up for this episode. Thank you so much, Abi, for jumping on and joining us.
Yeah, cool. It was a blast, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we look forward to being in your ears next week. If you like this show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find our previous episodes there and listen whenever you want. We love to hear from our listeners, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future episodes, you can reach us at tvvpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and have a great week. Wow.